Hello students, in this video we're going to be adding the next component to our tutorial, which is going to be the UI or the user interface. Previously we just added in the coins to collect and also the camera that follows around our player horizontally at least. So now we need to add our interface to show the score that we've been collecting. So we're going to start by creating a new node, or a new scene I should say. The scene is going to be called user interface, and the root node is going to be a control node. Now I must admit this is probably not the best written part of the tutorial, so hopefully that now makes sense, but let's do that together. So we're going scene, new scene. The node that we're going to start with is a control node, which I've obviously searched once before. And we're going to save this immediately, and this is where the name comes in. So again, I'm saving to my scenes folder because I am separating these out, and I'm going to call this user interface. If I can type, that is user interface. Okay, and .tscn because I deleted that without paying attention, and save. Now, I don't usually like to use spaces in my file names, but again, I'm following the instructions here reasonably closely, so I'm going to stick with that. But I would suggest if you really want to put a space that you either use camel case instead that we've mentioned earlier, or put a underscore between them. I prefer not to use spaces. But anyway, let's keep going. It says we're going to rename the root node to UI. So let's rename that, and notice it is a capital U, capital I, not lowercase. Okay, we can see that we've got a colored rectangle. This is the bounds of our controls. This is what the user interface is going to be. Okay, and we need to change that. Okay, so this is going to add two things. A coin, we're going to have a coin icon in here and a text box. Now, before we go on, let's see, can we move or change this? Not at the moment. That's okay. Let's keep going. So we're going to create a new child node of type texture rect. So with our UI selected, we're going to add a child node, texture rect, which is basically just going to add a rectangular texture box to it. And inside that, we're going to add our image, which is the coin. So this is going to be the example of our coin that we're going to put our score next to. So we have a texture field over here. Texture just is another name for image, remember? So let's go back to our sprites and let's drag our coin over, and that's what we're going to see. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit to see a bit better what's going on. So again, this is our game window that we can see, that blue area, and this is our texture rect, which we can move around and put wherever. We're going to set its position to 2020. Well, let's do that manually. I just sort of moved it by my mouse. But again, let's change that. So the texture rect is going to be using the margin, I think. And I'm going to put that at 20 from the left and 20 from the top. So that's positioning it exactly where we want it to be. Okay. Then we're going to add a label for our text. So let's add another interface component. So add label, L-A-B-L, and again, let's get one of those. And it's going to be moved down here somewhere. We'll set its position in a moment, I'm sure. We're going to rename that label to be score text. And again, it's very important that we label things correctly, capitals, etc. Let's talk about its position. So this is actually where we should be changing that, sorry, in the rectangular position. So it's going to be at position 90 and x20. I think it might be the other way, actually. I think it's x20 and 90 in the next box. No. Let's have another look here. So x90, it's usually x is the first value, and y20. All right, that's better, but I think we've got this in the wrong spot. So let's take texture rect. Let's try that again. So the rect 2020. No, that's sitting in the right spot. So I'm not really sure why this is in the wrong spot. So I'm going to manually move it for a second. We'll come back and fix that if we need to. We do want to change the size, however. So size here as well is 100 by 64. That's why, because if we go back now and make this 90 and 20, now that's sitting where I thought it would, nicely lined up with our diamond. Okay, so it's important to follow all instructions, as I would have probably said in class before. So now we can see, we can't see our text because we don't have a font. Now that's something that is important to understand, that fonts don't just happen. Now when we open up something like Word, we have a whole heap of fonts that are already there. In game development, we need to include those fonts as part of what we're doing here. So we're going to add a new font resource. So in our file system, we're going to open the font folder. So we have a font here, okay? And we're going to find the dynamic font resource, and we're going to create that. Let me go back and try that again. Okay, so there is a default font, but it's not one that we want to use. So in the file system, open the font folder, which we have done. Right click on the font. This is what we want to do. Okay, and select new resource. So here is new resource, and we're going to have a dynamic font. So we're going to search for dynamic font, and we are going to choose that there. So we can just call it dynamic font. That's fine, that'll do. And if we look at our dynamic font in the settings, no, in the font section, sorry, the font data, we need to drag our actual font into it. So we've now got this font being used as what we're calling dynamic font. That could have any name, of course, if you like to. You can change that if you want. I don't think it matters. Other things we want to change at this point in the dynamic font. So if we click on that font itself, we can then change some other things about it. In this case, I want to change the size, sorry. So I want to make that 40 apparently. And I think that's all they're asking us to do. Yep, that's okay. So we're going to save that. And it's just something that now exists in our resources over here. Now, if we go back to our score text as our option, you can see that we have some default text. So I'm going to put something in there to begin with. I'm pretty sure it says to do that later on. Yep, we'll put a pretend value of 50 in there. Okay, and we want to change to use our font. So we're going to do that in the text section. So I'm going to just hide or shrink these back down. If I scroll down, and I'll just look for it here, there should be something where we can set the font. And I'm just honestly having a little trouble finding it myself right now. So if we go, custom fonts, this is what I'm looking for. And you can see our font is empty. So I can take my dynamic font, I can drag that over into there, and now it's using that font style. And you can see that default text of 50 is now showing up in there. It's a little bit high, so it's not centered. So this is where we're going to change our V-align property. So if I have a look underneath my font example, I have a V-align. It's currently aligned to the top of the box. I want to align it to the center of the box, and that's just going to make it a little bit better aligned for us. Okay, so now if we save that scene, of course, whoops, I accidentally pressed the wrong button. I'm trying to save the whole game again. So if I just save that scene, that's better. Now if I go back to my main, scene, I can bring in a user interface scene into that. Now, hang on, if I do that, it's going to go as a child of camera. So make sure I've chosen main scene, and I'm bringing in my interface. Now, it's no good sitting there, so let's bring it somewhere better. So let's grab that, and I want it to live approximately there in my window. Okay, so I've positioned it where I'd like. Now, if I press play at this point, you can see it is there, but it's not following along with my player. Okay, so like going off the edge of the screen. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. So what we need to do, as it says here, is we need to add our user interface to be part of a special layer called a canvas layer. Now the canvas layer allows us to have something that all the interface should sit over. So not the game elements, so our player, our coins, our level pieces, etc. But the user interface should all be part of this canvas layer. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. It might be something you want to research later, but it basically allows us to keep it moving with our game. So we're going to go back to main scene. We're going to add a new child node of canvas layer. Okay, canvas. I've got caps on for some reason. Let's take that off. There we go. It's a canvas layer, and I want to make my user interface now a child of the canvas layer just by dragging it. So for all intents and purposes, not a lot has changed. But now if I run my game, you'll see that my canvas layer is following along, or basically always staying stationary in my game window. So therefore the user interface, which is a child of the canvas layer, is also staying where it should. So it's now basically following, if you like, my player. There are other ways you can do that. You could literally link it into the camera, but having that canvas layer available really makes those sort of user interface elements really easy to manage. Okay, we're almost there. Let's close this and let's have a look at scripting of our user interface. So all we need to do is go into our user interface. So let's go back to the user interface, not theme, I was going to say, user interface scene. Sorry, I literally lost all my words there for a second. So the user interface scene, and I'm going to add a script to it. And again, I'm happy for it to be called user interface. And I'm going to save it though in my scripts folder that I'm using. That'll be fine. So it needs to have an on ready. Okay. So let's put that in there, copying it from the example. So it's going to get our score text. So it's getting the node score text, which is a child of where this script is going on UI. So that's okay. And then we are also going to create a function called set score. So let's copy this in. And looks like I need to just fix up my tabbing again like I often do. So that's looking a bit better. And again, I have left a space for a reason we'll come back to later. So this is basically going to get a reference to the score text, so that the box that's going to show our score. And when we call this function, it's going to change the text to be whatever the number is. And we've wrapped the number score inside str, which basically turns it into a string, which is text. We can't just display a number as text. We have to turn it into a string first. If you've done a bit of Python or something with us earlier at school, this will be familiar to you. We now need to go and save that. That's okay. We need to go to our player script now. So let's open that up in whatever method you prefer. So player script, we can just come down here and open it. And we're going to also add another on ready variable. So we're going to copy that. We'll go to the top of our script, and we've already got one on ready there. So let's put this one underneath, and that is going to get a link that we're going to call UI to the canvas layer and the UI. So let's make sure that that is the right path. So the root node, main scene, remember, make sure you've labeled it properly, then canvas layer, and then UI in capitals. And if I look at my main scene for a second, that is what I've got. The root, main scene with a capital M, capital S. Then I've got something called canvas layer underneath it. And then underneath it, as a child, I've got UI in capitals. So that path will work properly. Now, if we go one more thing, sorry, and that is down to the collect coins. So down that script, excuse me again there, sorry, losing my voice for a moment. that script that we made earlier called collect coin. Okay, we left that line in there. Well, this is where we're going to add in a new bit of code, which is this UI set score. Okay, so we're going to paste that in there. So that is taking that reference we just made up the top. It's calling the set score value and passing the score that we have at the moment onto that, and that will update the screen. Okay. If we press play now, what we're going to get is we've got a score of 50. But when we collect some coins, we're going to see that suddenly went down because we have put a default value of 50 to begin with. So we need to do something about that. So let's go back to our UI script. So the UI and the script for it, which I have here, UI and the script. And in our function ready, so when it first gets created, we're going to add this, which is basically going to reset our score text to 0. So I'm just going to replace this pass with score.text equals 0. So when we start our game now, we start with 0 displaying, and we can collect coins from there. Now, I want you to notice this again, we're diverting from the tutorial just a tiny bit. Our score is 0. Watch what happens to our score when we collect the first coin. It stayed as 0. Now when we collect the second coin, we've got a score of 1. I wonder if anyone knows why that's happening. Now it is a consequence of the way we added something just a moment ago. So if we go back to our player code, so we want to play a GD, it's got to do with this collect coin. What's actually happened here is when we collect the coin, we're being passed the value of the coin. That's correct. So each coin's worth 1, for example. This line is updating the interface with the current score. So remember, when we first start, our score is 0. When we update the text, it's 0. This line here is adding the new score. So this is where our score now becomes 1. We've already updated the score text with the value 0. So it's not until we collect the next coin and we come back here saying, hey, add another 1. Oh, let's show the current score. That's 1 at the moment, but then we add the new one on, which has a score of 2. So to really fix this, what we want to do is simply swap these two around. So the first thing to do is actually update our score, so add 1 to the score, and then when we set the text on the screen, we are showing the new value. So if we save obviously all of that first, play the game, 0, we collect our first coin, we've got a score of 1. New coin, 2, 3, 4, and so on. All right, so just a little order of the script is very, very important in this case. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. We have reached the end of our tutorial. Now, there's much, much more that can be done with this. This is the absolute beginning of a game. Some simple suggestions would be new enemies. So maybe a vertical based enemy, maybe look at rotating the saw blade that it still looks like to me, certainly changing all the graphics. You can look at adding in some different types of enemies, some different types of platforms. You could add a background. This grey is probably not all that interesting. We haven't even looked at sound effects yet. So there's so much more that you can do, but this is a starting point for a game. So thank you very much for persevering. Hopefully you've been able to understand what we've done. If you are having problems with your game, please look for some help. Read your error messages carefully. Make sure you're not just skipping over them, because they often have really good guides or information about what might be wrong. And then, as I said, seek that assistance from either a classmate or someone else working on it, or of course, if you have access to me, you can email me and speak to me about your code as well. Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Good luck with continuing to develop this game further.